Thank you, thank you. It's always a blessing to be here, and a special thanks to Joseph and to Nick for your hospitality, and thank you, Scott, for the beautiful flowers. It's a blessing to be here on this day. So the Dalai Lama shares that we can reject religion, we can reject ideology, we can reject all wisdom that is received. But the necessity we can't escape from is love, such as compassion and generosity. Imagine there's 7.7 billion human beings on this planet right now. And if each human being has the capacity to be loved, to be compassionate, to be generous, we wonder, what are we doing with all that unused power? What are we doing with all that unused power? What if those 7.7 billion people can express it? What would our world look like? Imagine, what would the world look like if we can show up as compassion and generosity? Maybe we would take better care of our land and our water so that all life can thrive. And maybe we can see beyond differences and appearances and see our neighbors as love, all of our neighbors as love. And maybe even when we turn on the news or when we swipe through our phones to see what's trending, what we see that's trending is not acts of separation, but acts of generosity and compassion. Wow. Imagine that. Imagine that power. Which brings us to our conversation today, which is to express and demonstrate the fullness of what we are. That divinity, love, compassion, and generosity. In New Thought, we often reference wisdom and wisdom teachers from decades ago, or even from thousands and thousands of years ago. And I believe that that wisdom is relevant today, but what's also relevant is the wisdom that's available at the point of each and every one of us. That wisdom that is visible and breathing in our culture today. And so today I want to reference some of that wisdom as well. One of my favorite sources of inspiration comes from one of my favorite gospels, the Gospel of Beyonce. So I'm going to break that down for us so that we can all be on the same page. The word gospel means good news. And Beyonce, if you don't know who Beyonce is, she is this mega star that expresses and demonstrates her divinity through her music. And she shares that with the whole world. So the good news that she shares in one of her songs is, I woke up like this. I woke up like this. Yes, I woke up like this. And what I love about that phrase is that she is claiming and demonstrating her divinity. And what I also like about that affirmation is that it has become an internet sensation, meaning that people have gotten that phrase and they superimpose it on other images. For example, there's an image of like an angry dog, and it says, I woke up like this. And then there's an image of someone with like crazy hair, and it says, I woke up like this. And what I love about both of them, whether we're claiming, I woke up like this, ready to take on the world, or whether we're claiming humor. Both of them, what they have in common is that they bring people together. It expands a message of oneness. And I believe that generosity and compassion has the same effect. As a matter of fact, let's take a moment now, look towards your neighbor, and let's affirm, I woke up like this. Thank you. So in that demonstration, in referencing a talk I gave here a couple of months ago, I shared that whatever intention or attitude we give our words, that's what we're demonstrating. So if we're demonstrating humor, then we're demonstrating humor. If we're demonstrating maybe a little bit of reservation or maybe a little bit of judgment, like, what the heck is this? Then that's what we're expressing. However, we're all of that. That spectrum is what we are. And the beauty is that we get to explore our divinity within that spectrum. There's moments where we're going to feel humorous, and there's moments where we're going to feel like, what the heck is going on with my life or with the world? And it's our choice to demonstrate our divinity through all of that. So there's another wisdom teacher of our culture today that I like to refer to, and her name is Akilah Hughes. Akilah Hughes is a millennial. She's a YouTuber. She does all these videos on YouTube. And one of the profound phrases that she shares that I love is the following: don't let your ice cream melt while you're counting everyone else's sprinkles. So I'm going to say that again in a more serious way. Don't let your ice cream melt while you're counting everyone else's sprinkles. And the reason why that's relevant for today's conversation is because sometimes when we're in that spectrum and we're stuck in that place of, what the heck is this? If we get stuck there, then what we're doing is we're focusing on what everybody else out here is doing or not doing, and then we start to control everything out here. And when we're forgetting our divinity, we're withholding our divinity. When we're withholding our divinity, we are hoarding our power. We're hoarding our power. Whenever we hoard anything, it's not healthy. And in that space of not expressing our divinity, we feel a dis-ease, and an uneasiness because there's something within ourselves that's willing and ready to be explored. That's the uneasiness. Are you guys with me here? Yes. So in that space of uneasiness, we become dependent on the world out there to validate us. We become dependent on ideas, thoughts, feelings that reflect doubt, worry, despair, anxiety, judgment, jealousy, greed, and the list goes on and on. That's why it's important for us to claim our divinity. So now let's take a moment of self-reflection. And if it helps you, you may close your eyes and take a nice deep breath. And then ask yourself, is there an area in my life, whether it's big or small, where I'm experiencing a little doubt, maybe some despair or anxiety, and maybe it's not even that big, maybe it's a little confusion. And then as you breathe in that insight, ask yourself, how am I withholding my divinity in that area of my life? How am I withholding my divinity in that area of my life that's causing me to be dependent on doubt, anxiety, confusion? And take another deep breath. Just remember this insight. You may open your eyes. Remember this insight as a personal guidepost to guide you to today's lesson and the week, and as you go on. So let's dive into our first point. How can we claim our divinity? The best way that I can think of that is to illustrate and demonstrate a story that shares that point. So there was once a woman who was a manager of a restaurant in this huge office building, and the restaurant was in the lower level. And there was a security guard that was part of that office building. And as you can imagine, no one really said hello or acknowledged him because he kind of blended in the background. So no one would say hi to him. But the woman, the manager, she made it a point that every day at the start of her shift and at the end of her shift, she would say, "Good morning, good afternoon, how are you? How's your family? How are you feeling today?" And one day, as she was closing up the shop, the restaurant, she was the last one there. And she recognized that there was a little light inside the freezer. So she goes inside the freezer to turn the light off, and the door closes. There's no one in the restaurant to help her open that door. So you can just imagine how freezing it was in that cooler. She was frantic. She did everything possible to get out of there. She was banging on the door. She was yelling for help. She was holding herself tightly. She was doing jumping jacks and exercise to keep her body temperature warm. And as time went on, her energy started to dwindle off. And still the door was closed. And then out of nowhere, whoosh, the door opens. Who do we think opened the door?
The security guard.
Right, the security guard. The security guard opens the door. So the woman's reaction was, "Wow, thank you, thank you, thank you." She hugs them and she asks the security guard, "How did she know I was down here?" And the security guard responds, "Well, you're the only one that recognizes me and makes it a point to say good afternoon and good evening. And when you didn't come up to say good evening, I knew something was wrong." Wow. Amazing, right? So that story shares our first point, how to claim our divinity. What the woman did is that she showed up to express God at the point of her. And for those of us who have an allergic reaction to the word God, we can also say that she showed up expressing her divinity through generosity. Every day she said, "Good morning, good afternoon, how are you doing?" Those were prayers. Those were prayers because she was demonstrating her divinity, not only through her words, but her actions. And it wasn't like a one-shot deal, like, let me pray for this man once, say good morning, and check it off the list. She prayed on a continuous basis. This continuous basis is a divine pattern. And that divine pattern is each and every one of us. We have the choice of how we want to express that divine pattern. The word prayer comes from the ancient Sanskrit root word palal, which means to choose to be wondrously made. So the manager chose to be wondrously made through her divinity, her generosity. So that brings us to our second point. How can we express more generosity in our lives and in our world? There was a study recorded in the Times magazine done by Nature Communications, and what they did is they grabbed 50 people and they gave them $100 each. Half of them were asked to think about ways to share their generosity. So they had to think about who they were going to give it to, why they were going to give it to them, and how. And what the study found is the persons, or the 25 people out of the 50 who were asked to do that their minds triggered the creative parts of our brain that allows us to be more centered, more focused, be more innovative, have experiences of success and happiness. So we can just imagine the power of generosity if we were to apply it to that place in our life where we're experiencing a little doubt and worry. How powerful that might be. So here's the how-to. The how-to can be shared through what Eric Butterworth, one of the classic Unity authors, shares, is that whenever we become aware of this divine activity that's within us, then it's easier for us to demonstrate and put that into action. And one of the tools that we can use, it's called the law of mind action. So you're probably thinking, well, what's the law of mind action? Well, the law of mind action is when we affirm an idea such as love, joy, and for our conversation today, let's say generosity. So let's affirm generosity. When we affirm generosity as a possibility, as being real, then what starts to happen is that we start to attract and expand more ideas that reflect generosity. And then that invisible substance at the point of us propels us to demonstrate that into our world. And some of the greater demonstrators of our world can go back from decades and 1,000 years ago and today. One of them is Martin Luther King. He saw the injustice and inequality in our world, in our nation. So he affirmed his divinity. He utilized the law of mind action to affirm love. He expanded the ideas of love that propelled him and humanity to take action. Another wisdom teacher from the Christian religion is Jesus. He saw that immigrants were being mistreated. He saw that people were being marginalized. So what he did is he claimed his divinity. He affirmed through law of mind action, love. That idea expanded to more and allowed us to demonstrate that into the world by having him as an example. So we are just like Beyonce, like the manager of that restaurant, like Martin Luther King, and the wisdom teacher Jesus, because we all have that divine pattern within us. And we have the choice to choose how we can demonstrate that into the world. So to summarize the whole conversation and to give you a takeaway, I came up with an acronym. It's called ACT. So it's something that we can apply to our lives in that spectrum, especially in that space of what the heck is going on with my life, is to remember the word ACT. The letter A stands for acknowledge your divinity. And you can define that divinity however you choose. And then once you recognize that, move on to the next letter, which is C. Create experiences that reflect your divinity. Create them in your mind first so that it can expand to other ideas and propel you to take action. And the last letter is the letter T, which means trust. Trust your divinity. Trust that your divinity is always available at the point of view, all the time, even in those moments of what the heck is this. But also remember it in those moments of joy, humor, compassion, and generosity, because we're all of that. And to complete and close the lesson, I want to close with Akilah Hughes when she shares, "Don't let your ice cream melt while you're counting everyone else's sprinkles."